I think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a mistake everyone would have forgiven if they loved me enough. But the look on his face when I told him, when he realized I'd lied about my past and cheated days before our vows, wasn't anger. It was disbelief. The kind of silence that means something inside him broke and won't be fixed again. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Verena Cole. I'm 29, and I make other people's weddings look perfect for a living. That's the irony of it. I can design beauty for anyone but myself. My fiancé, Daniel, always said I had a gift for details. He meant it kindly, but he didn't realize how far that went. I notice everything. What people want to see, what they're ready to believe, and what they'll never question if you smile at the right time. When we first started dating, he told me everything about his past, his mistakes, his heartbreaks, even the things he wasn't proud of. I admired that honesty. I also knew I could never match it. So when he asked if I'd ever cheated before, I looked him in the eye and said no. I said it with conviction, practiced softness, and just enough vulnerability to make him believe me. It worked. He called me the most genuine woman he'd ever met, and maybe, in that moment, I wanted it to be true. We got engaged a year later, the perfect couple on paper. Loyal, stable, well-matched. My sister Mara said it looked too perfect. I told her she was jealous. The truth was, I liked the way people looked at us, the way his mother called me a blessing. I liked being the good one for once. But that version of me, the honest, faithful one, was built on a story I'd already rewritten. Then, the week before our wedding, I saw Ryan again. My ex, the mistake I'd sworn I'd outgrown. He walked into the same hotel where I was hosting a client's rehearsal dinner, smiled like no time had passed, and said, "You still lie the same way." I should have walked away. Instead, I laughed, told him he didn't know me anymore, and agreed to have one drink. For closure, I told myself. Just one drink. By the next morning, everything I'd built, every careful lie, every promise, was already cracked. I didn't know it then, but it was only a matter of time before Daniel found out. It's strange, really, how easily people believe what they want to. When Daniel proposed, I remember thinking he looked like every dream my mother used to have for me. Safe, clean-cut, the kind of man who follows through. He held the ring like it meant forever, and I said yes because it was the right answer. Love didn't feel like lightning, it felt like approval. That's what I really wanted, to be seen as someone worth trusting. The first few months of our engagement were effortless. We planned, we laughed, we smiled for photos that made people comment things like, "perfect couple." I'd built a career around appearances, and now I was living inside one. The more people admired us, the more I believed in the version of myself I was pretending to be. Daniel adored me in that quiet, constant way that felt unshakable. He wasn't flashy, not like the men I'd dated before. He was simple, steady eyes, steady hands, steady heart. He'd ask how my day went, and I'd tell him only the parts that made me sound kind and capable. It started small, the lies. When he asked about my exes, I edited the stories. I made them cleaner. I said I'd been cheated on once, left heartbroken, wiser now. It sounded noble. When he asked if I'd ever been unfaithful, I smiled and said, "No, I don't think I could live with myself if I did that to someone." He smiled back and said, "That's one of the things I love about you." That was the moment I felt the first real pang of guilt, but it faded quickly. He wanted to believe I was different. I wanted to believe it too. My sister Mara knew better. She's the only one who remembers how messy I used to be. How I broke Ryan's heart and blamed him for it. How I made every mistake twice just to prove no one could tell me what to do. She came by one night to help with the wedding planning and saw the save-the-date cards laid out on the counter. "You really think you can just start over like this?" she asked. I told her, "That's what people do. They move on." She didn't argue, but her face said everything. Before she left, she looked around the apartment and said, "You've built a perfect life, V. Just remember, it only takes one crack for the whole thing to shatter." I laughed it off, though her words lingered long after she was gone. Daniel, meanwhile, kept making plans. Venue visits, family dinners, little details that showed how much he cared. He trusted me with everything. When his mom, Elaine, asked if I wanted her family's heirloom veil, I said yes, pretending it meant something sentimental instead of strategic. I knew wearing it would make her adore me more. Everything I did had that purpose, to be adored, to be above suspicion. But the thing about pretending is it never really stops. The lie becomes part of your reflexes. One night, while we were having dinner, Daniel told me he'd been talking with our priest about the vows. He said, "I think honesty is the foundation of everything. I don't care about the past, as long as we tell each other the truth now." The fork in my hand froze halfway to my mouth. He smiled at me like he always did, patient, trusting. I swallowed hard and said, "I've already told you everything." He nodded, completely at ease. That's when it hit me. He'd never even considered that I might lie to him. His trust was so total it felt unfair. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my hair, staring at my reflection. For a moment, I imagined telling him the truth, that I'd cheated in the past, that I'd done it more than once, that I'd never actually learned from it. But then I thought about his face, the way he'd look at me after that. I couldn't stand the idea of losing that expression, the one that said I was good, so I buried the thought. A few days later, while reviewing venue contracts, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach twist, Ryan Alden. I hadn't seen his name in over 3 years. The message was simple. "Heard you're getting married. Congratulations. Maybe we should grab a drink, for old time's sake." I stared at it for a long time before locking my phone. I told myself he didn't mean anything by it, that he was just being friendly. Still, my heart was beating faster than it should have. That night, when Daniel came home, I told him I'd had a long day and wanted to go to bed early. He kissed my forehead, said, "You work too hard." As he walked away, I reached for my phone again. My thumb hovered over Ryan's message. I wasn't going to reply, I just wanted to look at it one more time. But then, without thinking, I typed 2 words. 1 drink. I hit send before I could stop myself. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. People meet their exes all the time, right? It didn't have to mean anything. Still, I spent an hour picking out what to wear. Not too much, not too little. Something that said, "I've moved on," but also, "You'd still want me." When I arrived at the hotel bar, Ryan was already there, leaning against the counter like he'd been waiting his whole life for me. Same smirk, same careless charm. He looked at me and said, "You still do that thing with your hair when you're nervous." I laughed, though I wasn't nervous. At least, that's what I told myself. We ordered drinks. He asked about the wedding, about Daniel. I talked about it like it was a project, not a marriage. All logistics, timelines, guest lists. I said, "It's perfect. He's perfect." Ryan grinned and said, "You used to say that about me." I rolled my eyes and told him I was different now. "I don't lie anymore," I said, half joking. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" His tone was teasing, but it landed like a warning. We laughed about old times, though there wasn't much funny about them. He brought up the night I'd walked out on him mid-argument, how I'd told him he didn't deserve someone like me. I shrugged it off, said we were young and stupid. He leaned closer, his voice lower. "You haven't changed, Verena. You just got better at pretending." Something inside me twisted. I wanted to prove him wrong, to show him I wasn't the same selfish girl he remembered. But I also wanted him to still want me. That contradiction sat heavy between us, unsaid but obvious. When he brushed his hand against mine, I didn't pull away. It felt dangerous, familiar in a way that made my heart race. I told him I should go. He said, Stay for one more drink. I said no. Then he smiled that same crooked smile, and suddenly I was saying yes. I blamed the champagne, the nostalgia, the way the room seemed to tilt just slightly whenever he looked at me. The truth is, I didn't need excuses. I just didn't want to stop. We talked for hours. The bar emptied, the music softened, and I kept telling myself I was still in control. I said I'd leave soon. I said it again 15 minutes later. Then he said, "You ever miss us?" And I froze. I wanted to say no, but I didn't. I said, "Sometimes." That was enough. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle, and it wasn't slow. It felt like history folding in on itself, all the bad decisions I thought I'd outgrown coming back at once. I told myself I'd stop it after a second. I didn't. The next thing I remember clearly was the morning light coming through a window that wasn't mine. My dress was on the floor, my phone blinking on the nightstand. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself this wasn't what it looked like, that I could still undo it somehow. Ryan stirred beside me, smiling like he'd won something. "Guess closure's overrated," he said. I wanted to slap him, to yell, to do anything but sit there feeling the weight of what I'd just destroyed. I got up, got dressed, and left without saying another word. My phone buzzed on the way down the elevator, a message from Daniel. "Morning, love. Don't forget your appointment with the florist." I felt sick. At home, I threw my phone on the counter and went straight to the shower. The water was scalding, but it couldn't burn off what I felt. I kept thinking about the way Daniel's voice softened when he said my name, how he always listened like everything I said mattered. He didn't deserve this, but then another thought followed. He'd never know. If I just stayed quiet, if I acted normal, this could disappear like it never happened. I told myself that again and again. It never happened. By the time I got dressed, I'd practiced the smile I'd wear when Daniel came home. I'd tell him I'd had a busy morning, maybe throw in a small story about a client to sound casual. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time before walking out the door. I looked composed, successful, engaged. The kind of woman who didn't make mistakes. The kind of woman Daniel thought I was. The week that followed was a blur of rehearsals, tastings, and fittings. My job made it easy to hide. I knew how to act busy, how to smile through anything. Every morning, I told myself the same thing. It's over, it's buried, and no one ever has to know. I convinced myself that guilt could be managed if I stayed distracted enough. But guilt has a way of slipping into everything. The way I spoke, the way I laughed, the way I touched him. Daniel didn't notice at first. He was too caught up in details, in making sure everything would be perfect for us. He'd send me small notes throughout the day. "You're my peace in all this chaos." I'd smile when I read them, then feel my stomach twist. Every kind word from him felt like a bruise I'd made myself. I started overcompensating. Extra affection, spontaneous plans, buying him a watch he'd once mentioned wanting. I told myself it was love, but it was penance. At my next dress fitting, Mara came along. She watched me spin in the mirror and said, "You look beautiful, but something's off." I asked what she meant. "You look like someone rehearsing," she said. I laughed it off, told her I was just tired. But she kept watching me, her eyes sharp. "Did something happen?" she asked. My throat went dry. "Of course not," I said too quickly. She didn't believe me. "You've got that look again, V. The one you get right before everything falls apart." That night, I went home and stared at the dress bag hanging in the closet. It should have felt like a dream come true. Instead, it looked like a costume for someone else's life. Daniel came home late, carrying takeout, smiling like always. He kissed me on the forehead and said, "In 1 week, I get to call you my wife." I forced a smile, nodding as I took the bag from his hands. We sat on the couch eating in silence, the TV flickering in the background. He started telling me about his co-worker's bachelor party, how the guy got too drunk, and almost missed his own flight home. I laughed automatically, but he looked at me strangely. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem somewhere else." I said I was just tired. He reached out, brushed my cheek with his thumb and said, "You're all I ever wanted." I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't breathe under the weight of it. The next morning, while checking emails, I saw a message from Claudia. "You'll never believe who I ran into last night." My heart stopped. I opened it. "Ryan, he told me about your little reunion." My hands went cold. She added, "Don't worry, I told him you were getting married and to stay away." "But people talk, V. You should be careful." Careful. It was already too late for that. I replied with something short, "Thanks for the heads up," and deleted the thread. But my pulse wouldn't slow down. I started imagining every possible version of that story reaching Daniel. What had Ryan said? What did Claudia really know? Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it was him, not Daniel, not anyone who mattered, but Ryan, ready to ruin everything. At work, I couldn't focus. My assistant asked if I was okay. I said yes. I said it so many times that I almost started to believe it again. But that night, as Daniel and I finalized the seating chart, I noticed his phone light up on the table. A message preview from Mara. "You need to ask Verena something before the wedding." My heart dropped. He didn't see it, and I didn't dare ask. When he went to shower, I sat there staring at the glowing screen, my reflection faint in the black glass. My hands were shaking. I imagined the conversation, Mara telling him she didn't trust me, that I had secrets. She wasn't wrong. I just didn't want her to be the one to expose them. Daniel came back wrapped in a towel, smiling. "You're quiet tonight," he said. I forced a laugh, saying, "Just wedding stress." He nodded, kissed the top of my head, and said, "In a few days, none of this will matter." But as he walked past me, I caught my reflection again in the phone screen, my eyes hollow, my smile thin. And for the first time, I realized he was right. In a few days, none of this would matter, because by then, the truth wouldn't stay buried anymore. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be perfect. It was at the beachside venue we'd picked months ago, all candlelight and soft music, the kind of evening that photographs well. I told myself that if I could just make it through the night, everything would hold together. I wore a white dress that wasn't my wedding gown, but close enough to make people stare. Daniel looked at me like I was everything he'd ever wanted. I tried to look back at him the same way, but I could feel the lie pulsing under my skin. Our families mingled, laughter and small talk filling the air. Elaine, his mother, made a toast about loyalty and faithfulness, words that landed like stones in my chest. Mara sat across the table, eyes on me the entire time, unreadable. When the toasts ended, she leaned over and whispered, "You should tell him before someone else does." I smiled tightly and said, "There's nothing to tell." She just sighed, the kind of sigh that means she's already given up. Halfway through dinner, I noticed Daniel's phone buzz on the table. He ignored it, but I caught a glimpse of the name. Ryan. My blood ran cold. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, praying he wouldn't look at the screen. He didn't, not yet. He was too busy talking to his uncle about the honeymoon. I laughed at something someone said, but my voice sounded hollow in my own ears. When I excused myself to go to the restroom, I locked myself in a stall and pulled out my phone. There it was. A new message from Ryan. "You should be honest with him before I have to be." My fingers shook as I typed back, "Don't you dare." The 3 dots appeared for a moment, then disappeared. Nothing more. When I returned to the table, Daniel was quiet. His phone was face down now. He smiled at me, but it was the wrong kind of smile. Polite, tight, careful. The kind people wear when they're holding a question they don't want to ask in public. My stomach flipped. I asked if everything was okay, and he said, "Fine. We'll talk later." The words hit harder than shouting would have. I tried to laugh it off, to steer the conversation somewhere lighter, But the table had gone strangely quiet. Elaine's gaze darted between us, then to Mara, who looked like she already knew what was coming. The air felt thick, like everyone could smell the truth on me. When the dinner ended, Daniel said he wanted to take a walk. I followed him down the sand, heels sinking into the wet surface, the wind tangling my hair. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "Do you know how many people congratulated me tonight? How many told me I was lucky to have someone so honest, so loyal?" He laughed, not kindly. "It's funny, isn't it?" I stayed silent. Anything I said would be a mistake. He turned toward me then, his face unreadable in the fading light. "Did something happen with Ryan?" My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. "Of course not," I said too quickly. "He's just trying to stir up trouble." He nodded slowly. "So if I look at my messages right now, I won't find anything?" I didn't answer. His phone buzzed again in his hand. He looked down, eyes scanning the screen. Whatever he saw drained the color from his face. I tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. He held up his phone. "He sent me pictures, Verena." For a second, the world tilted. The sound of the waves faded. I could only hear my heartbeat hammering in my ears. "It wasn't what it looks like," I managed to say. He gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "Then tell me what it was." "It was a mistake," I whispered. "I just wanted closure." "Closure," he repeated. "You don't get closure the week before our wedding. You get caught." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but he shook his head. "I trusted you with everything. You could have told me the truth. Instead, I had to hear it from him." I reached for his arm. "Daniel, please." He stepped back again, the distance between us final this time. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't make this another performance." The wind picked up, scattering sand across my shoes. He turned away and started walking back toward the lights of the restaurant. I stood there, alone, the hem of my dress catching in the tide. The phone in my hand buzzed one last time. A new message from Ryan. Guess he knows now. I stared at the screen until the light dimmed, then threw the phone into the waves. The next morning, the apartment felt like it was holding its breath. Daniel's things were still there, his jacket on the chair, his shoes by the door. But the air was thick, heavy, like the house already knew what was coming. I barely slept. Every sound felt too loud. The shower running, the creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of my own heartbeat. I waited for him to come out of the bedroom, for the inevitable conversation that would decide everything. When he finally appeared, he didn't look angry. He looked calm. That was worse. Anger I could handle. Anger meant I could argue, defend, spin. But calm meant he was done. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten dinner, made plans, laughed about our future. Now it looked like a negotiation desk. "I'm not going to yell," he said quietly. "I just need you to be honest with me. All of it." I swallowed hard. "It didn't mean anything," I said. "I made a mistake. One mistake." He nodded slowly. "When?" "The week before the rehearsal dinner," I said. "It was stupid. I was overwhelmed and he cut me off. Please don't make this about being overwhelmed." His voice was steady, almost detached. "You didn't trip and fall into him. You made a choice." I felt my face heat up. "Yes, I made a choice. A terrible one. But I've regretted it every second since." "Did you regret it before I found out?" he asked. The question stopped me cold. I opened my mouth, but no words came, because I hadn't. Not really. I'd regretted the risk, the possibility of exposure, not the act itself. He saw the hesitation and nodded like he already knew the answer. "I was never going to tell you," he said, his voice quiet but sharp. "You would have married me and let me spend my life thinking you were someone you weren't." "That's not fair," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "You're acting like I'm evil, like one mistake defines me forever." He looked at me, expression unreadable. "It's not the mistake. It's the lying. You've been lying since the day I met you. That's not true. It is, he said. You lied about your past. You lied about who you are. You even lied about why you loved me. That last sentence stung more than anything else. Don't say that, I whispered. I do love you. Then why did you need him? I had no answer. My mouth opened, but all that came out was a choked breath. He stood then, running a hand through his hair, pacing once before stopping by the window. You know, when Mara told me she didn't trust you, I defended you, he said. I told her you were honest, that you were better than what people said about you. People? I asked. He turned toward me. Ryan wasn't the only one who talked. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. You think no one notices how you rewrite stories? Claudia told Elaine what you said at the fitting, that you'd never settle for ordinary. My mother thought I was imagining it, but now I see what she meant. He scrolled once and set his phone on the table. A photo filled the screen. Me, leaving the hotel. The timestamp was 2:43 a.m. My hair messy, my expression blurred but unmistakable. The shame hit like a physical blow. I'm not sharing this with anyone, he said. I'm not here to destroy you, but I won't marry you, Verena. I can't. The word can't landed heavier than won't. It sounded final, absolute. I reached for him instinctively. Daniel, please. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can... He stepped back. You think this is something you can fix with effort? You broke trust. It doesn't come back with work. It doesn't come back at all. Tears blurred my vision. You can't just walk away. I already did, he said softly. You just didn't notice. He turned and walked into the bedroom. I heard drawers open, zippers closing, the sound of fabric rustling. I followed him, desperate. Please don't do this. I love you. It was a mistake, that's all. I was scared. He didn't look at me as he packed. You were scared of being ordinary, he said. You were scared of being known. He picked up the ring box from the dresser, the one he'd used to propose, and set it gently on the bed. You can keep it if you want, or sell it. I don't care anymore. Daniel. He turned to face me one last time. His eyes were tired, not angry. You didn't just lie about what you did, he said quietly. You lied about who you are. And then he left. The sound of the door closing was softer than I expected, almost tender. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. My hands were shaking, but not from shock, from realization. Everything I'd built, the image, the control, the perfection, had collapsed in a single night, and there was no one left to blame but me. I sank onto the bed, clutching the ring box like it could still mean something. But it was just metal and memory now. Outside, the city went on, cars passing, people laughing somewhere far away. I wanted to scream, to make the world stop, but all that came out was a broken laugh. I'd spent years telling myself that lies were just softer versions of the truth, that if I believed them hard enough, they'd become real. But now, staring at the door Daniel had walked through, I finally understood what Mara meant when she said one crack could shatter everything. The crack wasn't the night with Ryan. It was the lie I told the first time Daniel asked if I'd ever cheated. The one I smiled through, thinking love could survive on half-truths. It couldn't. In the days that followed, the silence in our apartment became unbearable. I'd catch myself listening for footsteps that never came, waiting for the sound of his keys at the door, his quiet humming while making coffee. But Daniel was gone for good this time. His side of the closet was empty, his toothbrush missing, the scent of him fading from the sheets little by little until it was like he'd never lived there at all. People started finding out almost immediately. Elaine called first, her voice flat but restrained. She said, "Daniel's staying with us for now. He doesn't want you contacting him." I tried to sound calm, said I just wanted to talk, to explain. She cut me off. "There's nothing left to explain, Verena. My son deserves peace." Then she hung up. I sat there for a while, staring at the wall, hearing her words echo in the quiet. By the end of the week, Mara showed up. She didn't knock, just walked in and tossed a grocery bag on the counter. "You need to eat," she said. I wanted to be angry at her, to tell her this was partly her fault for saying anything, but I didn't. I didn't have the energy. She looked around at the mess, unopened mail, scattered clothes, the untouched takeout boxes, and shook her head. "You could have had everything," she said softly. "Why did you throw it away?" "I didn't mean to," I said, my voice cracking. "It just happened." She sighed. "That's what you always say. Things just happen around you. The lies, the cheating, the fallout. But they don't. You make them happen, and then you act surprised." I wanted to argue, but she was right. I'd spent years rewriting my mistakes into misunderstandings, blaming timing, stress, anyone but myself. I'd been so good at it that I almost believed my own stories. Now, sitting there across from her, I realized I had no one left to convince. After she left, I tried to distract myself with work. But clients started cancelling. Word had spread. Not the full story, but enough. Someone must have overheard things at the rehearsal dinner, and gossip travels fast in my business. "We just don't feel comfortable moving forward," one bride said over the phone. I tried to sound professional, told her I understood, but when the call ended, I broke down. I'd built my career on being the woman who had everything under control, the one other women trusted to create their fairy tales. Now I couldn't even keep my own life from collapsing. I thought about deleting social media altogether, but the part of me that craved attention wouldn't let go. I posted a picture of the beach, the one from the rehearsal dinner, and wrote, "Sometimes things fall apart, so better things can grow." The comments started pouring in. Sympathy, curiosity, gossip thinly disguised as concern. Someone wrote, "Did he really leave you right before the wedding?" Another said, "He's better off." I deleted the post an hour later. It didn't feel empowering. It felt pathetic. That night, I opened my laptop and saw an email from Daniel's lawyer. My heart sank before I even clicked it. Termination of wedding contract and notice of legal costs. It was formal, detached, cold. He wasn't suing out of revenge. It was just business, a line drawn to make sure our names would never be connected again. The same man who used to write me love notes was now sending documents about breach of trust. I poured a glass of wine and read the email 3 times. By the end, the words blurred together. I wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to tell him that I was sorry in a way that sounded real. But what would that even mean now? Sorry after you've been caught is just damage control. Later, I found myself scrolling through old photos, us at the lake, laughing under cheap string lights, his arm around me at my birthday dinner. I zoomed in on our faces, searching for something I could hold on to, a sign that maybe he'd still loved me enough to forgive. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. I'd never stopped performing, not even then. Every smile was calculated, every gesture rehearsed. I'd built a relationship on choreography and called it love. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. A courier again, another envelope. I didn't even ask what it was before signing. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten this time. Daniel's handwriting. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself the truth. I hope someday you find it." That was all. No bitterness, no threat, no promise of reconciliation. Just a quiet sentence that hurt more than any accusation could have. I read it until the ink started to blur from the tears. For the first time, I didn't try to spin the story. I didn't tell myself he'd come back, or that he'd regret leaving. I just sat there, realizing he was right. I didn't even know what the truth was anymore. That evening, I walked down to the park near our old apartment. The trees were bare, the air cold and sharp. I sat on a bench and thought about how easy it had been to confuse attention for love, lies for strength, control for happiness. I'd always thought being wanted was the same as being loved, but Daniel had loved me, fully, quietly, patiently, and I'd thrown it away for the thrill of being seen for a single night. As the sun went down, I pulled the letter from my pocket and read it again. You owe yourself the truth. For once, I didn't argue with it. I didn't rewrite it. I just let it sit there in my chest, heavy and certain. When I finally went home, I didn't open my laptop, didn't reach for my phone. I just turned off the lights and sat in the dark. The silence wasn't comforting, but it was honest, and maybe that was a start. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.